Good evening. I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and I am here as the host for tonight's first webinar out of two this evening. We're going to be talking about how to write a job application letter. And with everything like this, I recommend that if there's something that you have a strong interest in, if perhaps you are expecting to go on the job, whether that's now or in a year's time, please let us know, because there are many different examples we can use, but there's nothing so useful as something that you know that you will need and that you will benefit from. So if you want to volunteer that in the chat, great. If it's something that you'd rather send via private message, awesome. Let me just make sure that you can hear me, because I want to make sure I'm not speaking out to the void. So if you can hear my voice, please let me know via typing in the chat room. Great, thank you. So we are going to dive right in for this. So it'll be a focused webinar. We're going to do our business, and then we'll have lots of chances to ask follow-up or take a break before the next webinar. So we're going to start by looking at what the Harvard Business Review has to say about writing a cover letter for a job. Now, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and please, again, let me know that yes, you can see the screen here. So you should now be seeing my web browser where I brought up this article in Harvard Business Review. And I'll also go ahead and I will share that link in the chat in case it's something you want to read or bookmark yourself. So this is a piece that has been updated. So it is fairly current with the present day trends. I would say there's not a whole lot that's changed about cover letter strategies in the last 20 years. But occasionally you'll see some stuff from the early days of the internet where they're still haven't quite adjusted to some of the communication patterns. But this one is pretty current. So this article begins with an introduction, and then we move into the question of, should you include one? And almost everyone that I've ever talked to who is in a hiring capacity said it never hurts to include a cover letter, provided it's not something that they said no cover letters. There's a small realm of things, like I've seen a number of state jobs where they were supposed to evaluate first on resume alone and then summon a short list of candidates to interview after that. But in most cases, you are not only allowed, but encouraged to include a cover letter, because it's an opportunity to have people read that and then look at your resume saying, oh, yes, I can see how this person would fit in. Second, you'll see they say do research. And don't worry, we're going to do more than just breeze through this, but I want to show you how this is organized first. Research, not just for the sake of curiosity, but to help see how to customize your cover letter. Now, I wouldn't suggest going so far as spending a lot of time following the company on social media, but the idea of, if you don't know what this is, especially for the smaller company, seeing how they project themselves, how they see themselves, the image, the branding that they want to do, the culture, that's also helpful for you to know, is that something you would like to be a part of? And that can cross over into the cover letter that you write as part of your job application. Now, focus on the future. So it shouldn't be just a, here's what you've done before. It should also be a what you would envision or what you would offer to be doing with the company. And this is something that sometimes people will just focus on the what they've done before, because that's what they're thinking of. That is after what the resume about. But the point is, you want the cover letter to enhance and complement the resume, not just repeat what's in there already. So make sure you do connect it to what you would do in that position with that institution, etc. Now, this is an excellent opportunity should you wish to give us an example of a field that you are either actively or considering or expecting to apply for a job in. Otherwise, we'll see the examples I have prepared. All right. Now, we have emphasize your personal value. Absolutely. You don't want to come across as arrogant in a letter, but you do want to show your qualifications, because someone's reading the letter is looking for people who will be able to do the job that they are hiring for, and ideally someone that they would like to work with as well. And so if you get along well with people, well, mention that. If you have a particular set of skills, mention that. Enthusiasm, this is more of a general tone. I've read many application letters where it's clear that the person wanted a job and they weren't particularly caring about this one. And that was usually because they just said, I have so many years of stuff. And there's actually a time and a place for that. There are many jobs where it's entry level and you want to get the foot in the door. But even so, if you can show an enthusiasm for this particular job, that can break the tie. Tone, if you have something specific to say about the place and its mission, just as an example, so I have a church job with a church that was very active in the civil rights movement, and I like that. It's a cool bit of trivia. It's something that aligns with some things that I've done. And, in terms of replying, you could say, oh, here are these commonalities. I would love to join this family at the church. And they do talk about it as a family community because there are lots of parishioners who've been there for decades and decades. And when someone who's moved away comes back, it's a big event. Now, that's a particular environment that you might convey you want to be in, or that you have something that will complement it. And so when you are looking for that, be authentic. Don't make something up just for the sake of saying something nice, because if you do get to the interview stage and they ask you about it and you made it up, that's not going to go nearly as well as, oh, yes, I'd love to tell you more, because you actually have a lot to say about that. Keep it short. I think probably the worst job application letter I've ever read was 8 pages long. Just to skip ahead, the normal length for most positions now is around a page. For some that require a lot of advanced training or seniority, 2 pages. But 8 pages, there were many other things that were excellent about this person, but the committee looked at that and said, anyone who has the poor judgment to write an 8-page letter here, we don't feel like they would be a good fit. And so they did not even interview that person. Which is a shame, because I think they had many other excellent qualifications, but brevity was not one of those. And then get feedback, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. So let's take a look now at our slides again. So if we were to distill down that article, we'd say that in general, it's saying, do some research on the job you're applying for, research the organization for the job you're applying for, start strong, give us something that makes the reader think either I want to read more, or yeah, this person would fit in. Emphasize your personal value, what you are bringing, more than just the body, whether that's a particular skill, an enthusiasm, motivation. It's not always a matter of having all the skills yet, but if you learn very fast and have a demonstrated record of that, awesome. Your enthusiasm, we talked about that already. Stay formal. There's a certain formality of you're taking the time to put things together that lends itself to having a dear so-and-so or to whom it may concern, rather than just opening with someone's first name, say. And to get feedback. So this is an area where the Writing Center is happy to help. It is something where we often work with students who are graduating or near graduating, and sometimes alumni who want to work on a cover letter. And that's great for all the reasons that having another set of eyes helps you spot little things that get in, whether that's wording where someone says, well, that's a little bit of a mouthful, I'm not sure what you mean, or hey, you used the wrong form of to. If we're going to boil down those general bits into some more specific actionable things, we want to align the language. Let me show you an instance of what I'm referring to here. So if we were to go ahead and do a search here for a job, let's go ahead and say this is in the, let's say in the marketing field. So we'll do a search for a marketing assistant job. And let's see what comes up. Well, let's go ahead and we'll take this junior marketing assistant position here. And we'll ignore the Google summary here. We want to look at the job description itself and see what are the specific things that they are looking for. And there's some terminology here that might not be apparent. They say experiential marketing, client KPIs. And so one of the things that happens with modern day job applications, especially for larger companies, they're often using software to do the initial round of screening where it will look for certain keywords to try and see, does it look like this person is meeting the basic requirements? So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what KPI means, but I can tell you that if they're using screening software, it's probably looking for that. And not so if you were to spell that out, and let's just take a little search to see what KPI means. So we have key performance indicator. So if you were to write out key performance indicator without using the abbreviation KPI, and they were using that screening software, it would say, oh, well, they didn't list that. And so this is an example of where you would want to make sure you're aligning not just the general terminology, but specific keywords that you see are being used. Similarly, marketing campaign, if you're talking about your own experience, I would recommend using the same term there. So it's clear to the software and to someone reading it that, hey, this is that exact thing that they were asking for. And often that is a matter of looking at what you've done and translating it into the specific terminology that they're asking about. And that is something that's not always intuitive. I'm reminded of a case at a prior employer where the director of human resources said, I don't know, no one seems to be qualified for the job. They keep mentioning this American Psychological Association experience they have, and we're not advertising for that at all. And that was a case where he was functioning in the same way as the screening software was, because he had seen the job description, which said APA. Now, for people who are using it, they generally know that it means the American Psychological Association, and in this case, the American Psychological Association style system. But those applicants were spelling out the term instead of using the abbreviation. And since he only knew the abbreviation and was only expecting the abbreviation, he wanted to screen those people out. And we want to avoid being in that bucket. So one thing that people will often do is they'll either copy and paste this text or print it out, and then they'll go and highlight things that they see, oh, here's a specific keyword or abbreviation that I want to make sure that I use. And so in this case, we'd probably start with experiential marketing, marketing campaigns, promotion, sales, KPI, and that helps you make sure that you are advertising your skills in the language that they're looking for, especially because sometimes the terminology swaps as you go between fields just because of the particular lingo that they have. So make sure you are speaking not just the same language, but the same dialect that they are looking for in your letter. Let's take a look at our slides again. So list some supporting specifics. One of the reasons that 8-page job letter that I was talking about earlier was so long is that the person went through every item in their resume. And again, we want to keep in mind that there are different purposes for different documents, and that generally, if we look at the order which materials are reviewed, people will look at the cover letter first, and if they decide they want to proceed, then they'll look at the resume. So the purpose of the cover letter is to get someone to read the resume, just like the purpose of a headline is to get you to read the next piece of text in the newspaper or in the article. All right, to reinforce this, let's look at this through another lens. And this is going to be through this Balance Money article. And that one starts with this particular advice. To include the most convincing, relevant details in your letter, you'll need to know what the employer wants. So hopefully after our looking at that last thing, this is something that is now familiar to you. But let's go ahead and let's look at that article. And then as before, we're going to distill that into a couple points. So you can see that they are suggesting, as the previous one, if you have the chance, include a cover letter, even when it's not required. And also, as we discussed, if they say not to send one, specifically not, then don't. Now, usually in those cases, it will just get tossed out or ignored, but sometimes there's some people who say, well, if they can't follow those directions, we don't want to work with them. So again, if it says cover letter optional, include it. If it says no cover letter, don't send one. And here we have sell yourself, use keywords, edit, all good advice. And again, says do some groundwork. Look at the listing. If you're not familiar with the company or the other employer, do some additional research. And we'll see that they have an emphasis on matching your qualifications with what the employer is looking for and including the most relevant ones. Then there's some other stuff on the particulars of how it should be formatted. So if we're distilling that particular article's suggestions, we get decode the job ad, or do your research, see the things that they are pointing out that they want. When you're writing to make a case for your candidacy, which is basically how you can provide those things that they are looking for. Match your qualifications, show that you are able to do this, or will be quickly on onboarding, because there are some jobs that you need a foundation and they'll do the rest of the training there. Highlight your most relevant skills, experiences, and abilities. And then if we're looking at what in general is being suggested, we see that the standard is keep a professional looking font. The example people like to use is Comic Sans, but this also would probably not be the best place to say use the Papyrus font, which is used in a lot of advertising and in video games for anything that's trying to look a little bit older. And so if you stick to a standard font that is generally acknowledged as being professional looking, like Times New Roman, Calibri, even Arial, then that's fine. 11 or 12 point size, you don't want to go larger generally, because then it looks like you're making the text large to fill up space. You don't want to go smaller because you don't want people to have trouble reading that. And think how people these days, more than ever, are sometimes using smaller screens. So if you're on, say, a 22-inch desktop computer, just remember, even though 10-point font might be very easy for you to read, if someone's reading that on a tablet, it's kind of hard even for someone with 20/20 vision. So in terms of the spacing, once upon a time, single spacing was perfectly acceptable. It turns out that, especially on electronic screens, that having a little bit more spacing, like 1.15, it makes it a lot easier to read. 1.5, 1.5 pages is fairly common. Double spacing, if it gets you to look like you have a full page, that is one reason to do it. But I wouldn't generally add double spacing just to fill up more pages. If you have a letter that with 1.15 spacing fills up a page and has all the things you need, that's good, that's nice, that's concise. Do make sure that you use paragraphs and paragraph organization to draw focus. In some ways, this is no different than any other piece of writing that we are talking about. You want to make sure that people can see the details that you want to pay attention to. And some people break that point by point discussing job requirements. Some people will have a beginning, middle, end. There's more than one way, but make sure that you're not just submitting one big block of text where the details get lost. And also, the last thing before we go to crafting an example together, we want to keep in mind that the length of your letter is driven in no small part by the requirements of the position. If it requires more training, more experience, more, in some cases, letters after your name, then it might be a little bit longer. But in most cases, we're talking 1 page, and in those with more significant experience, we're talking 1 to 2 pages. So, for example, if you're applying for a university professor job, 2 pages is generally the limit. If you're applying for CEO of a company, they're probably soliciting you first, but if it is something where you are bona fide applying, you're going to give them a kind of greatest hits version in 2 pages. And if they're asking for something else like your vision for the company, that's probably going to be a separate document. So make sure to keep the cover letter itself concise. All right, now if you want to look at sample cover letters, I will say that a website like Indeed does make it very easy, because now you can go to one space and then find that in this case, literally dozens of letters. Let's take a look at that here. And so you see that they have a large variety of sample letters. Now, these will show you the format or a suggested format. It's certainly not the only way, but these generally have a good, clear organization. And then the devil is in the details that you put in to show how you are very qualified for this. But let's take a quick look at, say, this copy editor job letter here. You can see it starts with the who is this person, and then in a actual letter you would have generally the address for the company there, and then you see that they're identifying the specific thing that they're applying for. Useful because often there's more than one job search at a time. In this case, they're saying that they have personal experience with the company's product and that they know someone who's on the team already. Now, what would usually happen at this point is that if the person they name drop there is that the person doing the hiring would make a note to contact that person, or if they were in the room, ask them, hey, is Alexa a good person and for this job? In which case you might be able to jump to the rest of the list. So if you do have some connection like that, it is often well worth mentioning. It rarely hurts you if that person is well known and respected, but you should ask before you name drop them, because they might say something like, oh, yes, please don't do that. Something really embarrassing at work happened. It's probably not something you want to be associated with. Or they might say, oh, great. You should know that I'm recommending someone else as well, but I'm happy to recommend you, and therefore you're not surprised if things go a different way. Or they might say, and this is most likely the case, awesome. Give me a quick summary of details so in case someone asks me, I can easily reference some specifics. Speaking of specifics, you can see that this relatively short cover letter, since it's for a copy editor position, mentions their experience there, including mentioning specific volume and that they were rated very, very highly while still working pretty quickly. And at 8 hours in a standard workday, that's more than 3 articles per hour. That's a pretty fast pace. And you can see that they name drop having some recognition for their skills, and they end with a comment that they have great attention to detail. And then there's a little bit of pleasantries, and that's that. That's actually a very well written and letter for a position like that, because for someone coming in with a little bit more than entry level experience, but not too much, that's giving some key details that say, it sounds like this person is qualified for it. That would lead usually for a letter like this to be put in the keep pile for looking at the resume, which is really what you want your cover letter to do. Let's look at one more example. And feel free to volunteer a particular one if there's a area that you're especially interested in. But let's say we're looking at this digital marketing specialist position here. You'll see that this one says, again, who they are. And for a position where you don't know who's doing the review, dear hiring manager is fine. To whom it may concern is also just fine. And we can see that this is broken up. It's a little bit longer letter. I believe that this would probably be about a page and a half if we were using standard spacing and standard size. We see that they have the brief, here's me. They say that they have 7 years of experience doing this, listing some things that are properly aligning with the job description, saying, oh, social media, organic social media is a lingo thing. So if you saw that in the job description and you had done that, absolutely mention it. Email campaigns. They mentioned that they've worked in this specific type of job before, mentioned some of the settings, and some more, here are some specifics where the job is probably saying they want someone who has done that. SEO, if you're not familiar with it, is search engine optimization. It's all about when someone does a search and say Google, what comes up first. Now, this detail of where they found it, that's sometimes relevant because sometimes you'll find different versions of it, or if it's been posted in, say, a particular industry list or a for example, if it was advertised at a convention. But you'll also see some advice saying, don't mention that. And that's usually don't mention that if you don't have a lot of other content to go with it. But in this case, they're saying, hey, there's something in the description. You said these things, and hey, I've done that. And they mention not only do they know these particular bits of software, they have Adobe Certified Associate credential. They mention a specific number of campaigns that they've done at the same time, and any special things like, oh, getting an Employee of the Month award 3 times in a row, which, hey, this is where the expression flaunt it if you got it is. It's not boasting, as saying, hey, this thing you're looking for, I am good at it, and other people agree I am good at it. And then if we look through this, we'll see that they have a summarizing statement, which is helpful because it's a little bit of a longer letter. And they say that they pride themselves on collaborating well with other people and responding to messages from clients in a timely manner, which is not a bad thing to mention, because I would say that in this industry, a lot of people have a reputation for not being good at responding in a timely manner. So they're saying, hey, this is something that I have as well that is relevant, that isn't necessarily obvious in the resume. This kind of thank you, it doesn't really help, doesn't really hurt, but it is a nice way to kind of close things out. And you'll see that for the Indeed site, you can actually download all of these examples that they have and play around with editing them to kind of make it your own. But for our purposes, we are now going to finish with an activity where we are going to look at a sample job ad and craft a letter to go with this. Now, this is the point where if anyone has a particular field that they're really interested in seeing an example created for it, please let me know. We're going to start with this, with a position for a job in Abilene, the same town as our mother campus at ACU. So we see this ad starts with a little background on the company. I see that they state their mission is to transform lives and foster hope through genuine caring. We accomplish this by assembling a team of like-minded individuals who are truly called to home health care and wake up each day committed to making a difference. So you get the sense that they are saying this, and this is something that they would really like to find in the people who are applying, because they outright say they are assembling a team of like-minded individuals, of people who also are really passionate about that mission. So this is a good time to think what you have that might align with that. And then they list a number of values that are important to them. And then we see that they have a number of job responsibilities and then some basic qualifications here. Now, again, this is a relatively entry-level job because we have a college degree and 1 year relevant experience being required. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I got a message saying that they couldn't see my screen, so let's run through that again. And so I see that, actually, hopefully you can see this now. Please let me know if you can see it now that I've redone the share. Can you see my web browser now? Okay, thank you. Zoom is sometimes gets a little stuck on the sharing, so I appreciate the person pointing that out. So we're looking at a job here for a position, an account manager with a company that happens to be located in Abilene, Texas. And we want to ignore this initial information because this is pulled by Google. Their algorithm is trying to tell you what it thinks is the most important, but we don't want to trust that. We want to look at the actual position description, which is down here. So you can see that there's this theme in how this is listed. We have a heart for home health care. I have a bit about them, home health and hospice, okay. And they also mention down here, our mission is to transform lives and foster hope through genuine caring. We accomplish this goal by assembling a team of like-minded individuals who are truly called to home health care and wake up each day committed to making a difference. This is that part that I pointed out earlier, where they say, hey, this is something that we really want. We want someone who is like-minded, who agrees with this mission here. And so in, in some classes, you'll have an instructor who's like, I think this is really the kind of thing that might be on the exam. I think you should pay attention. We call that a hint, hint, hint. Here in the job description, this is a hint, hint, hint saying, yeah, this is something we're really looking for. We're very serious about this because it's repeated several times in different ways. So this is absolutely something you'd want your job letter to speak to. And then they say, okay, home-based care is so much more than business. It is our passion. Again, that's reinforcing the hint, hint. This is something we want you to tell us. It is something you are not only able, but excited to do. And then they say, who shares our values, called to serve patients in their home, and the face of vital caring. So a point of contact with people. And then we have some specific requirements and the skills that they say that they're looking for. So, and then down here, just to round things out, we see this is a relatively entry-level position. It requires a college degree, a year of relevant experience, and there's some skills, but we're talking something that's probably in that 1 to 1.5 page range rather than something that's a full 2 pages. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So for this, people ask me sometimes, do you recommend a particular template for using a job application letter? And you don't actually need one. You can just do a basic Word document but a lot of people feel that it looks more professional when they are submitting them, if it looks just a little bit different, and that's fine. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a document here from a template. And so you can search for a cover letter. One moment. Sorry, Word is taking a little bit time to get started here. There we go. So in Microsoft Word, you have a number of opportunities for, say, a template like this. And here's why I usually don't recommend using a template like this. It really, really decreases the amount of text that you have here. This is giving you less than half of the space you'd have if you just use a blank Word document, which is okay if there's very little to say. But for most cases, you want to be saying a bit more. So I would actually not recommend using a template like this. So let's go ahead and we will grab just a basic blank Word document here. And so you'll want to start with some basics. And, there are different conventions for how to do this. Some people will have from colon and then indent this little more. Some will have just tab. The important thing is to have the relevant information. And in this case, I'm just going to do a quick search for Vital Caring Group address, and then we'll add that. All right, so we have here our from and our to. And let's add our subject. Now we want to reference the specific position. So this is going to be account manager. All right, so we have our content. We don't see a name attached to this, so we'll just start with the basics. Why might it be important to mention that you're applying for the job in Abilene? Well, Vital Caring, as we saw in the listing, has more than 60 different locations in multiple states. And so you don't want to make it to the end of the interviews for, say, New Orleans, when you're actually trying to get a job in Abilene, where you might end up with that job and unexpectedly have to move to get it. All right, so what are we going to list next? Well, it's good to lead strong, so let's tell us the relevant information. Say I previously worked, that's kind of focusing on the past. How about I have 2 years of relevant work experience. Now, if you're writing something like this and saying your mission of, this is a good time to go and check that original ad. So let's take a look back at that. See, how did they describe their mission? They said to transform lives and foster hope. Okay. Now, don't focus on the details here too much, except for how we are aligning this. But one thing I want to show you, and should be particularly visible on smaller screens, the text is actually not that easy to read because it's only single spaced. So I mentioned earlier that the standard now is to have 1.15 to 2 to double spacing. And so if we look at this tool here, you'll see that the first option is 1.15. So just look at that text and look at what the difference this spacing does. It's not a lot of space, but it's just enough that the white space or the blank space around it makes it a lot easier to read. And here's the secret. When people with worsening eyesight use large print books, the text is printed in a larger font. But what makes the biggest difference in allowing them to read quickly is that there's extra white space between the letters and between the lines. And that makes it a lot easier and faster for us to read. So assuming that you're not running out of space, if you do 1.5 spacing, 1.5 lines, that actually is a lot easier to read. Now, double is often a little excessive, and in part because it can make it look like you are just filling up the space here. But if we take this text here and we make it 1.5 space, that looks just fine. You can see where there's space to fit in multiple paragraphs here. We're going to have to pause soon to get ready for the next webinar. So let's just recap some of the things that we've been talking about so far. So we began with looking at 2 sample guides for job application letters, one from the Harvard Business Review and we talked about how to take the larger list that they're having to look at the specific actionable things. We looked particularly at how to research a job description and look at the terminology being used for multiple reasons, both for aligning the text of the letter so it's clear that you have those specific qualifications, and also aligning the text of the job application for the purposes of getting through any automated screening software. And then we also looked at ways to highlight how your experience or aspects of you as a potential employee match what they're looking for, as we're just seeing in the example we're drafting, to talk about relevant details that reinforce things, and the virtues of giving the most specific details to help make your reader interested in seeing the resume and read more about your experience. And then we looked at another piece that recommended many of the same things from a different angle with some different phrasing. And then we looked at an additional job application and how some details like the font size, the spacing, and the margins factor into that. And margins are a good place for us to finish off here. So let's take a look back at that Word document again. All right, so if you are looking at this, and we'll zoom out a little bit. So most computers, if you have done nothing to Microsoft Word, you're going to have 1.5 or 1.25 inch margins on all sides, depending on which version of Word you're running. Now you can change that in layout. And let me just show you briefly, if we were to go to 1.25 all around, you can see that there's less fitting in there. And even if we adjust this, it just feels like there's so much white space on the left and the right side. It feels like you just don't have enough. So it's that perception that people might not quite pick up on why, but 1-inch margins are generally recognized as a standard thing. Occasionally people will tweak them, like the letter's just a little bit too long, and so they'll make the top margin 0.9 inches or something like that. That's still ballpark. That's the kind of thing where if you change from 12 point to 11.5 point font, you get much the same effect. So that's not a huge deal. But if it's conspicuously too large a margin or conspicuously a very small margin, then it might be something where you either want to spill over to another page or to look at ways to make your letter more concise. Because again, the letter is designed to complement the resume, to help get people to read the resume, but it is not supposed to recap all of the details that are in the resume. And again, we looked at some sample letters, sample job ad, and that is it for this webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can sign up for an appointment by going to my.acu.edu and under academic resources, selecting Online Writing Center. And if you're here for the next webinar, stick around. We'll be starting right on the hour. Thank you. Have a good night.